Okay, we got down to the fourth verse. Everyone who continues to commit sin is also sinning lawlessly, for sin is lawlessness. Now, it's almost impossible to translate that sentence without having redundance in lawlessness. I'll try to untwine it. And so we'll start there. Everyone who continues to commit sin is also acting lawlessly. Now, this was a blow to the solar plexus of the Gnostics, because they counted themselves as being keepers of the original relationship between God and man.
Like the original truth.
Yeah, they approached it as a philosophy, and they knew more about philosophy, but they did not approach it. They took away the most unique part of the biblical religion, and that is that the Old Testament law, what the Jews call the Tanakh, you need to get ready to spit to say that correctly in Hebrew, is made part of following God. That means you are what God told the Jews about the way to be pleasing to Him. We call that the law. It's more than the Pentateuch. And it is the thing, and that is joined to moral goodness. No other religion in the world, and I can make that statement, makes the belief in serving your God also a matter of moral purity. The pagan gods, the Hindu gods, the Buddhism religions, and so on, morality is taught all right, but it's not a part of whether you are serving God or not. And that is so foreign to the biblical way of doing things that it doesn't even make sense to most people for me to say it, but it's true. So what he says is, if you continue to do things that are against the law, lawlessness, you are lawless. You are without law. Now, this is using lawless in two different ways. They prided themselves on being keepers of the law. And watch out for anyone who prides themselves on being keeper of the law, who measures the degree to which they are pleasing to God by how much law they keep.
So this would be even beyond how the Pharisees thought that they were the main keepers of the law. The Gnostics were even more so?
Oh, yes. And they were more so for the same reason. They were trying to please men. They were trying to please men. And in trying to please men, you cannot please God. All right. He goes through the passage. Oh, one thing I wanted to point out in the third verse. It says, observe the nature of the love that God has bestowed on us by allowing us to be called children of God. Now, does that sound strange to you? It doesn't say that God called. Just read it as it's printed there. By what?
What's the question again? Sorry.
He shows his love for the Father, bestowed it on us, by allowing us to be called the children of God. And then he builds, the fact that we are children of God is the reason that the fallen world does not recognize us now that we are children of God. Now we're children of God, and it's not yet what we will be like. What that phrase, he allows us to be called children of God. We've been talking about God calling us children of God, and I'm not necessarily saying that they're different, but John picks up these little nuances. Why on earth would he say he allows us to be called children of God? What's implied there?
That others call us children of God.
What?
That other people also call us children of God.
Not other people, it's the same transaction. Acts 10:26, and the way we're called Christians first at Antioch. So, see those little pockets of teaching, they fit together. Terry brought us a big jigsaw puzzle. Had the tiniest, I mean, the little thing. I had to put on my magnifying glasses to see the pieces, much less the design. And
Oh, they finished it.
and they were called. John won't, I think, and I think this is I won't know, Mike, until I get Gospel of John. I think this is typical of John, that he picks up on these little statements. And it was God working through even the enemies. The hint in Acts 10 is that it was the enemies that called them. Why, you're just a Christ follower. And how often in the history of religion have the enemies of a way given the name? They assign a name. And it was intended, what?
It's like a pleasure that God says, even your enemies get it right.
I hadn't thought about that, but
And again,
Yeah.
It's a derogatory term from the enemy perspective.
Right.
that's exactly right. And what God says, take it and run with it.
Yeah,
Take it and run with it.
you don't have to call yourself anything. They are calling you what is actually the right thing.
What's true. Yeah.
One of the neat parts about this first section is also about the now and the not yet.
Yes.
He keeps that now and not yet tension that God's declared us to be something. It's not yet visible
What we
really are, but it's
Yet we are.
but it's declared that we are that.
Wouldn't another important aspect of this be that other people recognize that trait in us?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
It depends on whether you're talking about the community that are going through the same things, they will recognize it. But those who are outside the community, they don't recognize it. And
Well,
that's
they
one of the-
recognize something because they put a classification on it.
I think the same thing is at work here, is that was at work in the squad leader of the group that crucified Jesus. He said, surely, and the King James says, surely this man was a son of God. It doesn't really mean that. Surely this was a good man, catches his meaning.
Or an innocent man.
Yes, sure, that would be a good translation. I can't remember whether I translated it that way. But so that it's both the people of God and their enemies recognize a great fact. Jesus was the Son of God. And it's recognized in some way both by their followers and by their enemies. And
It's kind of like how God used Satan to crucify Christ and accomplishing his will.
yes, and we'll get in more of this in Job.
Charles, what made you choose the phrase "He allows us to be called" versus "He calls us"?
Because the Greek word does not mean a command or something, I told you to be called children of God. It is, and it's the so-called divine passive. There's places in the text, in Greek, where it uses a passive tense. They were called. And now you couldn't know that that was different from just a past tense. But if you read the Greek, you will know that it's different. And they were, that's the place where followers of Christ were first called Christianos. I think of the other religions. I hate to bring politics, but it is a clear thing. Do you know how the Russian Revolution succeeded like it did? Every time when they got up in the Duma, the temporary political system that took over after the Tsar was executed, the one group of them would say the majorityites are present. When they were very much in the minority. And that didn't leave any place for the opponents anything but to call them Minskyites. And that's, guess what? The minority. Every time they call the roll. It's in that intertwine of God as Lord of the church, Lord of his followers. He is also Lord of history. And he uses historical facts to bring forth his teaching. Now, you say, why go into all that? Because John did. That's the only reason I can justify it is John thought this way. He thought cosmologically. Try that on a dry tongue. cosmologically. That is, he related what God did in the church to the whole creation and the whole salvation. As he always says, in beginning.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you know, John 1 is
It's
a great illustration of his, you know, John clearly has way out of the water, bigger picture than everybody else.
Yes, that's the point.
Can you contrast that with the Jewish perspective? Because the Jews did they consider themselves children of God?
Yes.
They did.
And it is not in the same way exactly. But Paul points out to the Jews that there weren't any Jews until Abraham had been justified by faith. Abraham, the first Jew was not Adam.
Right, exactly.
The last Jew, in the sense we're using it, was Christ. Now there is neither Jew nor Greek. There's just one. I want you to see, I'm glad I brought up the idea of the jigsaw puzzle, because it was one of the hardest to put together that I've seen, because the pieces were so small. Thumbnail size. I can't even see my thumbnail without magnification anymore. Anybody got anybody they want to throw away old glasses I can try out? I need some.
Charles, so this idea that John, this is kind of his way of saying the upper story,
In a way, yes.
because he's recognizing God's overall plan in what's going on.
Yes. Now, and makes no difference what you claim. If you continue to do what God has said not to do, do you recognize this sin as a lawlessness? What does Paul call the idea of the Antichrist?
Man of lawlessness.
The man of lawlessness. So, however you come at it, there's more than one man of lawlessness. There's more than one man who's Gnostic. There's more.
It's a mindset.
It is what it is. It is refusal to say Jesus Christ has come in the flesh, and his physical death on the cross purchased my redemption. In other words, you cannot be a Gnostic and a follower of Christ at the same time. Abe Malherbe, who one of the smartest men I ever knew, his doctoral thesis at Harvard, which meant that he gave the valedictory oration in Koine Greek.
You need to talk louder, please.
What?
You need to talk louder, please.
Okay. Abe Malherbe gave the valedictory address at his graduation exercises at Harvard Divinity School in Koine Greek. I always chided him about it because I said there weren't more than 10% of the people there, including professors, who could understand you.
That's who he was talking to.
Yeah. No, he was discharging an honor. That was the honor he was given, and so he memorized it. Now, everyone who continues to commit sin is also acting lawlessly, for sin is lawlessness. You know that he was manifested to take away sins. Not only can you sin and get away with it, the very purpose for which Christ was sent to earth, manifested. Manifested means physically present. The reason he hung on the cross was to take away sins. You also know that in him there was no sin. There has been no successful attribution of a violation of the will of God ever stuck on Jesus the Christ. Yet without sin, the writer of Hebrews says. Everyone who is remaining in him does not habitually sin. Now, I had to get this word habitually in there. Nobody ought to claim that they're sinless. In fact, we've already seen if you claim that you've never sinned,
You done your life.
you've sinned right then.
Right.
Okay. Everyone who is remaining in him does not habitually sin. Now, that's the way the Gnostics thought it didn't make any difference how they behaved morally. If they were spiritually knowledgeable. Somebody pointed out that was kind of like the Pharisees. Well, the Pharisees were lambs, philosophically, compared to the Gnostics. The Gnostics, they believed it didn't make a bit of difference how you behaved.
Didn't they believe it was kind of like what they call the ghost and machine theory, that your spirit was totally separate from your body? So,
Yes.
you know, whatever happened in your body, hey, go for it. It didn't matter. It didn't affect your spirit or your soul or whatever.
If your mind, let's use the
Yeah.
word they use, nous, if your mind was correct, and that would eliminate a bunch of us, wouldn't it?
I know, right then and there.
Well, the term was, that I think I've seen applied, was, they called it metaphysical dualism, was what scholars.
Oh, yes. It was a metaphysical dualism. And all of the Central Asian and Eastern Asian religions, the Polynesian religions, they were all dualistic. I had to spend a whole chapter of my book to keep from ending up with God creating sin. Because if everything is dualistic, good and bad, it really doesn't make any difference what you believe. But my friends, it really makes a difference what the followers of Christ believe. Now, they don't have to believe, now this is going to blow your mind, they don't have to believe correctly. And there I'm on a peninsula it's hard to get off of. That is, they have to strive to. They have to make the effort. I have never been free from sin. And I'm not going to call on Minus Territory witness to deal with that one. I will take it as read.
Leave me out of it.
No fun.
But it's true. I have to strive, and it will always be a striving. It will always be that I have to fall back on a single word: salvation by what?
Grace.
Faith. Well, grace.
Through
But
God's grace, because of God's grace.
because of God's grace,
have
I am saved through faith.
Uh-huh.
That's what Paul spent nearly all of his adult life trying to get over to people. That it is that we must have the faith, the kind of faith that Abraham had when he was willing to offer his son in sacrifice, and God said, "No, I will accept your faith." And when God begins to judge me, or you, he does not see me.
Charles,
What?
I have a slightly different take on
Okay.
this grace through salvation. We want, if we really have faith, although I guess you're right, we do strive to avoid sin. If we really have faith, though, we want to do the things that the Bible.
That's, I hope that's exactly what I'm trying. What did Jesus, when he prayed? Nevertheless, not my will. What did he want? God's will, the Father's will. See, I can do no more than want. Because even in wanting, I can think of 2 or 3 things that I did yesterday that God might question. I'm not going to name them. That's none of your business. Nobody caught me.
God did it.
Except God. Yes. I can joke about it because I feel comfortable about going to God and saying, "Please forgive me for thinking that, for doing that, for having that dream." I've often wondered if we are judged for our dream. Why not?
Somehow we think our unconscious is separate from us, like we can't control it.
You know, Jesus didn't see it that way. He said it's not what goes into a person.
Every word that proceeds from the
Mouth. See? And and the justification for that is that it can't come out before it's in. And so you might better and that's the idea of examining ourselves.
Better to confess than to ignore.
Yeah, yes. Better to,
I have another thought along those lines.
all right.
If we sin in our dreams, because what we think about or dream about is a sin, we can obtain forgiveness of that sin by asking for it.
Same way you do any sin. But see, the Gnostics that John was attacking did not want to be forgiven. They wanted to be smartest.
There was nothing to forgive as far as they were concerned.
Yes, that's about the lawlessness who misbehaves and all this that we've gone into. They would not humble themselves to ask forgiveness. They did not need forgiveness. They had knowledge. And I am smarter than you. reminds me sometimes, there's a scene in one of the Ante-Nicene Fathers what is it? The people that handle cargo at loading and offloading ships.
Stevedores?
Stevedores. The stevedores at the dock in Alexandria, one of the groups was Gnostic, and the other was Christian. And they would holler their slogan, and the Gnostic would say, we are smarter than you. And the ones that were claiming Christianity didn't do much better, but they did do better. They said, we're sinners saved by Christ. And if the man who was giving us the story is true, there's no particular doubt of it, but it's one of those stories that's almost too good to be true. And they would yell back and forth. I can't believe that stevedores would be that much interested in an esoteric theological argument, but maybe I'm the one that's wrong and needs to repent.
Kind of saw it like common sense, rather than making it something that elevated. It was just, it made sense knowing what the gospel says, that they are sinners saved by Christ.
Okay. You know that he was manifested to take away sins. You also know that in him there is no sin. Everyone who is remaining in him does not habitually sin. The one who habitually sins has not really seen him, nor ever really known him. Now, that again is that blow to the solar plexus of the, he said, you have not seen him, and therefore, see, he said, we will be like him because we'll see him as he is. So that means that you Gnostics have neither seen nor believed in him. You don't know him. Jesus said, I will say on that last judgment day, depart from me. I don't know anything about you.
But Lord, we did all these things in your name.
Yes, Gnostic. Everyone who is remaining in him does not habitually sin. The one who habitually sins has not really seen him, nor ever really known him. Little children, let no one deceive you. The person who is acting righteously is right with God. This is nothing more than Paul's telling Christians they will be judged according to
Their works.
what?
Their works
The works done where?
on the foundation of Christ.
It's not what it says.
Works in the flesh.
The works done in this life. What else would you be judged for? Who was being judged on that in the 24th chapter of Matthew when they said, Jesus said, the sheep are over here, the goats are over there, and people say, well, when did we do this? And it was when they were alive. And that scares many believers, and I wish it didn't, because it has nothing to do. What else would you be judged for? Now, there are those who believe that you actually become righteous when you obey Christ, but you do not. You are only saved, redeemed by his action.
You're only on the path.
What?
You're only on the path going that way.
Yes, and so you can say, Lord, I plead the things I did while I was alive. Only what Jesus will judge is what you did to your fellow believers and your neighbor. What is it that sums up the law and the prophets? Love the Lord your God with all of your, I'm going to run it together, heart, mind, body, and soul, and your neighbor as yourself.
But who's my neighbor?
And who's my neighbor? Your neighbor is the person who is your neighbor. What?
The person who's in front of you at that moment is your neighbor.
Is your neighbor. Whoever or whomever God puts that in your path. You go to the parable of the Good Samaritan. God put a priest on the road, and the priest detoured on the other side. God sent a Levite on the road, and when the Levite saw the man's plight, he went through on the other side. But God sent a
Samaritan.
A
despicable Samaritan. Oh, guess what came to my mind?
I'm sorry.
Despicable me.
Despicable me. Every time I see that little man, I think of Despicable Me, and there's some deep theology there about being. And so every time I see that little man, I think, oh, Samaritan.
I like to think in terms of this parable. I realize it and been taught that this was an actual occurrence that had taken place.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that really speaks to religious people is the reason why the Pharisee and the Levite passed on the other side was because the law stated that if this person was dead and they had contact with that person, they would be unable to participate for 7 days in the religious ceremonies that were taking place. So they were en route to a religious ceremony, therefore they didn't want to contaminate themselves from being able to participate, which really speaks to us.
I'm going to tell my low point. I'm sure that many of you know it. I got a call from a fellow. He was 6 feet 8 inches tall, and he said the chief is drunk and just about dead from alcohol intake. If we don't get him to the hospital, he's going to die. This man was 6 feet 8 inches tall. I was 5'9". I went with him, and it was a big, double-storied boarding house there. Went up the middle stairway. Right down, you came in the doors, the cut glass doors. Big wide stairway, you went up, and here was the chief. He was a Lakota Sioux Indian. 190, 200 pounds, well over 6 feet tall. And so you had this 6'8" man at front, and you had little Charlie under his arms, and every time I take a step, came to the big double stairway, and he bumped down. But what the real thing was, we got him to the local hospital in time, and they detoxed him. And then it dawned on me, and I hope there was no reporters around, because the front page of the Daily Lufkin News would say, "Preacher caught carrying drunken Indian out of local brothel." Now, would I do it again? You better believe I would do it again. I've done the equivalent more than once. I usually take precautions. That time I didn't have anybody. I took a young man as witness to the cleaned out apartment of the woman who claimed to be the representative of the Queen of Heaven. I don't mean Mary, the mother of Jesus. I mean the literal Queen of the universe. And I had to get the police. They had to come out. I swore out a 30-day warrant for her middle judgment. And the little man that was with me, his eyes were about that big. That was his first brush with that kind of. See, love one another. You can get yourself in trouble loving people.
No good deed goes unpunished sometimes.
Yeah. So don't worry about it. God is going to judge you according to the deeds done, and what's he going to say? Where was God when I was carrying the chief out?
Right there.
He was opening, what?
He was also carrying the chief out with you.
Yes, he was helping me open the doors. I mean, if you want to get a little facetious.
Or Jesus would have said, I was the chief you carried out of the...
Yes, he would, come to think of
carried me
it.
out of the building when I couldn't
See,
carry myself.
that's the reason that we get a little confused sometimes, because we can play different parts in the same scene.
Right.
Interesting.
But I went to the elders and told them, I said, if you hear any stories like this, I'm going to tell you I was there. And so I don't know why they had to make such a big thing of it. They got up the next time and said, you know, if the congregation had heard any bad things about the preacher, they weren't true. And I wish they had said, it doesn't matter, but they did. They knew what they wanted, and they said it. Okay, our time is getting close.